we have got now the chance to answer the questions which have been sent in so far, but you still in the audience, you still can send in questions even during the answering of the questions. We try to answer all of your questions. This is a unique opportunity to take the chance to ask our experts, and so I would like to start with the first question, which was on the time validation. Is time validation applicable for both classic platform and adaptive platform? And the question goes to Stefan.
Applicable for both platforms. So the
that's
time
question.
validation, yes. So time validation is valid for both platforms.
Are there any different? What was the major differences, or is?
Yeah, then the major differences results from the fact that we have a different architecture in CP. So in CP, classic platform, we have to extend the basic software module of synchronized time-based manager by additional interfaces, while in the adaptive platform, we have these functional clusters. And in this case, we have to provide additional interfaces to the functional cluster of a T-Sync, ARA T-Sync. So this is the differences. It depends on the architecture, but the principle remains completely the same.
The same. Okay, thank you, Stefan.
Yeah,
so the next question goes to I think to Florin. Is the network firewall only at network architecture services level and only for N-PDUs or N-packets?
Yeah, so that's right. I think you got in the question everything. Maybe it would be helpful to answer the question by a bit summarizing the list of protocols and let's say the category of the filter group that are standardized within this concept. So as I've said before, based on the three types of firewalls, so the stateless packet firewall, the stateful packet firewall, and the deep packet inspection firewall, we're having similar categories for filters. So stateless packet filter, stateful packet filter, and deep packet inspection. And now if we're taking these categories for the stateless packet filter, the list of protocols that are applicable is applicable for this type of filter is the Ethernet, the IPv4 and v6, and UDP, right? And what we can do for this, the filter is based on, let's say, in the Ethernet case, the Ethernet header, the IPv4 and 6 header, and for TCP UDP, the source and destination ports. If we're taking the stateful packet filter, we're having here considered the ARP, NDP protocols, TCP, and ICMP, and here, besides let's say the previous category, we're taking care or into consideration for the filters the IP addresses, the protocol ports, the sequence numbers of the packets, and so on, and also some flags like TCP flags like SYN and ACK, and yeah. Then for the last one, the deep packet inspection filter, right here where we have the SAM IP, SD, and PDU. And as you mentioned, in the PDU and N-PDU, we're filtering by header ID and length of the field.
Okay, so thank you, Florin, for the comprehensive answer. So the next question goes to Pingley. What is the plan for releasing the virtualization and the vehicle API gateway concepts?
I assume we are talking about automotive API concept. Then, as Thomas introduced, the automotive API might be not released as a concept, but as an open project. There are a lot of activities ongoing in Working Group Cloud, a lot of discussions ongoing, technical discussions ongoing with Covesa. The architecture was also defined, and also the details, and also regarding methodology was also in proof of concept phase. I think next year we could see some big progress for this concept or open project.
Thank you, Bingley. Next question goes again to Florian. Does AUTOSAR provide some example use cases for the firewall and for how the filter rules can be configured?
Yes. So we're providing a bunch of use cases for the firewall, and also describing for the firewall filter rules, what's the structure they should follow. And yeah, we're also having examples of how to configure a firewall filter rule. Also, let's say details of how to enforce these firewall filter rules once they're in place, and yeah, how to configure them, how to update the firewall configuration for both adaptive and classic.
Okay, thank you, Florian. And next question goes to Ahmed. Will the new SUM IP architecture be slower due to the additional validation steps? So it's a little bit on performance impact.
Actually, yes, not that much. At the end, those validation steps will happen mainly in the service discovery stage or for the method call request, and they are just checking one against a list. What will take time? The authentication, and the authentication is existing parameter, and if you need authentication, this is what you will pay for security. It might take time. But as I said, for the additional, the authorization, this will happen for one time, and at the service discovery and for the first method call, then the socket connection will be open and the communication will go on. Just you need to make the authentication, which is maybe happen in the switch, so it will not affect that much the performance of the SOM IP.
Okay, also the next question goes to you, Ahmed. Who is responsible for updating the access control list, and why is updating the configuration out of scope?
Okay, first part, this might be.
Who is responsible? Yeah.
Yes, first, this might be in the application or might be a specific vendor implementation. Why we don't standardize it for this release? First, there are several options to do. You can use secure diagnostics to send the request and receive the request, and then verify them. And you can have your own format, own payload, signed request, send it in the network. And if you look for it, this update mechanism will not be SOM IP ACL update mechanism. This might be at the end, in the next release, might be standardized a common update mechanism for any ACL, maybe for the SOM IP and for the firewall, and maybe for the other protocol, for DDS or for other protocol can be used. So yes, maybe in the next release we will have some kind of common ACL update mechanism. Just might be, but for now it is you can use your own way, application
Okay.
or in the code.
So thank you, Ahmed. And the next one is also for you. Regarding the secure some IP ACL, is PEP and PDP done at client or at server side?
In both. If you are the client and receive a service offer, you need to make both for this offer. And if in the server, when he receive a subscription request or receive the first method call, he need to do also policy enforcement and policy decision point. So it in both, depending on your client or side and offer or subscription and method call.
Okay, thank you. And also the next one is for you. How is the modeling for the generation of the secure some IP ACL handled when a service is offered by one ECU and the subscriber is located on a different ECU?
Yes, it will be the list of the IP addresses of those expected provider or expected consumer, and it will be configured in the service discovery module. For the client, it will be linked to the client service with the new container called client service allowed provider with the expected provider IP address and the IP address type. And in the server side, it will be server service allowed consumer with a list of IP address for the expected subscriber to this service elements event and consumer for this service method. So yeah, it will be a new containers added in the configuration and service discovery.
Oh, thank you, Ahmed. And now the next one goes again to Pingley. In the TSN streaming use case, are streams similar to the Ethernet audio video bridge?
Good question. So now all Ethernet frames are identified in switch at ingress already as streams based on a particular set of frame attributes. Our initial goal was to introduce AVB stream or AVTP stream actually. So we have and in order to increase the quality, we also introduce the stream identification. Then for this, for AVTP stream, this could be recognized in the switch, and we'll also get a 64-bit stream handle ID assigned, and this consists of MAC address and also unique stream ID from AVTP protocol.
Thank you, Bingley. And next one goes to Florin. Just disappeared. In which AUTOSAR specifications are the functions of deep packet inspection described?
Yeah, so thanks for the question. So as I mentioned before, we have described the firewall filter rule construction for all the three firewalls, and that means also the deep packet inspection. And now with the introduction of the firewall, let's give for example. The adaptive platform, there the firewall is also as a new function cluster. So with this, new documents appeared, and new documents are available in the standard for all of the three flavors. So for foundation, we're having the RS firewall, which is the idea of this RS firewall is to have the harmonized firewall requirements across both platforms, and also description of the firewall filter rules. For the classic, we have the new document CP SWS firewall, where you can find the functional specification for the firewall module. And in the adaptive, we're having the SWS firewall, where you can find the functional specification for the functional cluster firewall. So mainly all the requirements that that were mentioned, for example, the deep packet inspection, you can find them in these documents. If you're looking for the classic one in the document for CP, and if you're looking for CP SWS firewall, and in the adaptive in the SWS firewall.
Thank you, Florian. The next two questions go to Oliver. Does the new AP architecture support microservice-based applications?
I would definitely say yes. So even that the functional clusters of AUTOSAR itself are not microservice based, because that's more operating system extensions, as I tried to mention. But application designs, we have the software clusters, and a software cluster is the thing we can atomically update from UCM side, and you can group one process or one executable in their multiple executables. So, and with this outside, you can always build microservices. So with less dependencies, they are updatable. So I would say even not the new, already the old architecture supports that to make your application as a microservice. So there is no problem.
Good. So next one for you, are there any plans to support containers and standards related to containers, for example, the Open Container Initiative?
So let me say here, AUTOSAR collaborates with SOAFEE. So, and I would expect, and I heard also rumors that there might be concepts coming up to exactly support that. But as Thomas mentioned, we have also this stabilization release. So also a high market demand was to get adaptive more stable, because many specification items are currently in draft. So they doesn't need to maintain backward compatibility. Therefore, it's mainly a resource or potential resource issue that we can make it in the next release. But nevertheless, if you look to the market, there are at least some OS vendors and so on supporting already in the context of AUTOSAR containerization. I'm not sure which container formats they use, but at the end, there are practically solutions in the market. Therefore, I would in general say, AUTOSAR is more or less ready, but not in the standard yet. But here we have the collaboration with SOAFEE.
Okay. That's exactly the next one of the next questions. It goes to Thomas. How is AUTOSAR contributing to SOAFEE?
Yeah, as I mentioned in my presentation, we are in discussion with Eclipse SDV, with Covesa, and also with SOAFEE, how the collaboration could look like in future. We have defined work streams to work exactly on strategy and vision, which means how at the end can we collaborate. So it might be a little bit too early to give you a clear statement, but I would see it not as contributing, but more as a collaboration, which is the goal behind this activity.
Well, thank you, Thomas. And the next number of questions goes again to Oliver. How do API and service interfaces differ?
So the platforms or foundation functional clusters are API based. So we currently have chosen C++ because in C++ we get safe compilers and so on. Of course, we have also an explanatory document which shows how you can derive from this C++ APIs and Rust language binding. And we need to see in future how we continue here. Services, of course, are always services. So typically you offer them on the network so that other ECUs, other processes, other virtual machines can access these services. But we have for high-speed communication between services also this in the process zero copy IPC, so zero copy in the process communication. If you want to move large data from one process to the next process. So services are typically more either for the network representation, so network offerings and like UCM, VUCM communication, or applicative communication between ECUs and so on. And APIs is really, maybe you can call it kind of OS extensions, so which are more efficient to use C++ API. If I just think about an example, if I have this timestamp API to get the latest timestamp, and I would just offer this by a service, then this timestamp would never be precise at the end, just by the internal mechanisms how a service is working.
Also, the next question goes to you. What is the main difference between signal-based communication and service-oriented communication?
On one hand, a simple question, but on the other hand, a quite complex answer possible. Signal-based communication is, I would say, the traditional CAN-based communication. So you have a communication matrix. You say this ECU is transmitting a signal or value to another one. And due to the fact that this was microcontroller based, we quite often had a kind of specific encoding to this signal. So we say, we have a float value. We have just simple example would be a vehicle speed, but we want to know not just in kilometer per hour. So you want really to say, hey, my resolution is a 0.1. So I want to say I have 40.2 kilometers per hour. So that's a float. It's not easy to calculate this in microcontrollers. Therefore, typically you say I have a factor and so a compo method with a factor and an offset to represent this better in your software to have a better computation. And this was sent out also in the network. Service-oriented communication is more that you already have the physical values that you exactly say, I can deal with floats and so on, and I am representing this. But compo methods and these offset calculations are also possible here, and then you also need to encode it more. But another important difference is the signal-based communication is always typically don't have a service discovery. There are some OEMs using also signal-based communications with service discovery, but typically this is not, or that's unusual. So typically it's not. In service-oriented communication, you offer the service, so you can then use this service by a client, and you can, on a method, directly call this in some IP. For example, you don't need to subscribe for events. You need to subscribe to this event, and so on. So, and here is also with the service discovery a huge difference.
Well, Oliver, there's another question for you. Is AUTOSAR Classic still important in the zone controller high performance architecture? Which ECU is probably running based on AUTOSAR Classic? So it's more on the overall question.
Yeah, that's really, let me say, I would say yes, at least when we look to the market, there is quite often still discussions to have in a zonal controller classics, especially we have a lot of control loop operations in a car, and it's always the question, should they run directly in the actor or should they run in an own ECU, or should they run in the zonal ECU? So is the zonal really just the gateway also, or put we also in the zonal that we incorporate ECU functionality in the zonal with hard real-time control loops? So then classic would be definitely better than an adaptive in a zonal ECU. But on the other hand, quite often I also hear that zonal controllers currently are planned with adaptive-based or microprocessor-based environments and so on. But for me, it's mainly the use case of which functionality should be put into the zonal controller and which not. But also to maybe have here what AUTOSAR is planning currently, we have an idea that we want to describe deployment scenarios exactly to review ourselves. So how far we want to go with which AUTOSAR system. So maybe also in the next release event, we can show these possible deployment scenarios. And then this would be exactly, or there would be an answer exactly to this question.
Thank you. And now is a question for Florian. AUTOSAR raised a concept to install the firewall in the switch with a lightweight AUTOSAR stack, which would be a good idea to offload the MCU and enhance the whole pretension. Does AUTOSAR plan? It's disappeared, unfortunately. Could you please show me the question again? Well,
Yeah, nevertheless, I think I got the.
yeah, I think you can answer it.
Yeah, so as stated before, between the firewall on the adaptive part and the classic part, on the classic we have this addition of the firewall on switches, and we have in the specification dedicated information regarding this, so it's already available. So you'll find detailed the how classic AUTOSAR can be deployed on switches, because yeah, this is a current trend in the automotive industry to deploy switches that, let's say, may contain an internal controller, and this so-called additional microcontroller allows the switch to perform the complete network routing without a connection to the host microcontroller, which, yeah, as a consequence, reduces the overall port-to-port latency. So yeah, it's possible to deploy an instance of classic AUTOSAR on such a switch, and on such a switch, the AUTOSAR firewall integration can be done with the mention that the packet routing is done within the PDU router, and what we let's say focused on within the firewall concept is it was not planned to introduce a switch specific routing module, but we just focus on the firewall functionality. And the switching routing module might be added, of course, at a later point in time with a separate concept if this is needed. So I hope that this addressed the question.
Yeah, thank you, Florian. And a last one I've got for Pingley. Has AUTOSAR released any specifications regarding big data?
Not I'm aware of. I don't think so. So maybe colleagues, you could correct me.
Question is, what is big data meant here? So big data like Google, and you want to calculate based on a lot of data something. And there, of course, we have something like our log and trace, but I would not treat this as a kind of big data statistics and so on. I would see this more on application level and not on AUTOSAR level. Nevertheless, if big data is that we can measure big data streams, so for the development of a car, there are solutions in the market available to do such big data measurements to really have the radar, LIDAR, and so on. But yeah, it's maybe too unprecise this question here to give a concrete answer.
Yeah. Okay. So,
but yeah.
Thank you.
I don't think here. Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah. Would you like to add something, Pingley, please?
Yeah, I assume the big data here is not talking about volume of data. Should be some data analytics.
But if it's big data analytics, then it's exactly that's application purposes. So
yeah, that's AUTOSAR, what I thought.
We can just provide data and not do the analytics at the end.
So I think it's more about data mining or something like it. Okay, so thank you very much, you, for answering the questions, and also the audience for this active participation and sending in so many questions. In case you have any further questions, please feel free to send later on your questions to AUTOSAR. We try to answer. The experts will be happy to answer questions even later after we have let's say finished the release event. So we have come now to the end of our release event for this year. I hope you all got a lot of new insights and you could experience that AUTOSAR is progressing and meets all the upcoming new challenges. I would like to thank you, our audience, for your interest and participation, and all our speakers for the contributions. AUTOSAR is a huge community, and our success is based on your devotion and commitment, the audience, all the partners. And before I finally conclude, I would remind you not to forget to book for the AUTOSAR Open Conference next year in Tokyo, since the ticket sales have started and you have a good chance now to get your tickets. But to conclude now, I wish you all a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, and look forward to another opportunity to discuss with you. Thank you very much.